Admiral Kex Thara of the Altarian Defense Fleet watched her tactical display with growing desperation. 17 colonies had fallen to the hegemony in the past month, and her remaining forces were scattered across 3 star systems, barely holding the line against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The distress beacon had been sent to Earth 48 hours ago, a desperate plea for military assistance from their newest trading partner. The humans were known throughout the local sector as competent merchants and decent engineers, but their military capabilities remained largely untested. Still, they were the only ones close enough to respond before the hegemony completed their conquest. Admiral, her communications officer announced, "We're receiving a transmission from the human vessel Unconventional Wisdom. They're requesting permission to dock." Kex Thara's 4 arms moved swiftly across her control interfaces. "One ship? We requested a battle fleet, and they send us 1 ship?" The main viewer flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the human vessel. A middle-aged woman with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes sat in the captain's chair, looking remarkably relaxed for someone entering a war zone. "Admiral Kex Thara, I'm Captain Sarah Murphy of the Human Relief Corps. I understand you folks are having some trouble with the hegemony." "Captain Murphy," Kex Thara replied, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. "We appreciate Earth's response, but we were hoping for something more substantial. The hegemony has over 300 warships in this sector." Captain Murphy's smile widened. "Oh, don't worry about that. We brought the right people for the job. Permission to come aboard." An hour later, Kex Thara found herself in her own briefing room, staring in bewilderment at the most unusual military unit she had ever encountered. The humans had indeed brought reinforcements, 23 individuals who looked nothing like soldiers. There was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a soft-spoken woman in her 60s, who introduced herself as a retired psychology professor. Next to her sat Marcus Thompson, a lanky teenager with multiple piercings who claimed to be a social media influencer. The group included a stand-up comedian, a divorce lawyer, a kindergarten teacher, and what appeared to be a professional card shark. "With all due respect, Captain Murphy," Kex Thara said carefully. "They're not," Murphy confirmed cheerfully. "They're much more dangerous than that. You see, Admiral, the hegemony has spent centuries perfecting warfare against military opponents. They know how to counter fleets, break siege lines, and neutralize conventional forces. But they've never faced what we're bringing to the table." Dr. Vasquez adjusted her glasses and spoke in a gentle voice that reminded Kex Thara of her own grandmother. "The hegemony operates on a strict hierarchical system based on absolute authority and unquestioning obedience. It's a very fragile system, actually." The teenager Marcus looked up from what appeared to be a handheld gaming device. "Yeah, their whole command structure is basically one big toxic workplace. All we got to do is introduce a little chaos." Over the next 12 hours, Kex Thara watched in growing amazement as the human reinforcements began their work. It started with Dr. Vasquez. The elderly psychologist had requested access to the hegemony's public communication networks, claiming she wanted to understand their culture better. Within hours, she had identified the psychological pressure points that kept the hegemony's authoritarian system stable. Working with Marcus, she began flooding their networks with carefully crafted messages designed to look like internal communications between hegemony officers. The messages were subtle complaints about unfair promotions, questions about resource allocation, hints about corruption in the higher ranks. Meanwhile, the stand-up comedian, a woman named Jenny Parks, had somehow gained access to the hegemony's entertainment channels. Her comedy routines were actually sophisticated psychological operations designed to make the hegemony soldiers question their orders through humor. "Why do we always attack on Tuesdays?" she asked during one broadcast. "I mean, who decided Tuesday was Invasion Day?" Did someone check with the people being invaded? Maybe they're busy on Tuesdays. Maybe they prefer Thursday conquests. We should be more considerate. The divorce lawyer, Robert Chen, had been studying hegemony legal codes and had discovered that their military contracts contained numerous loopholes and contradictions. He began filing formal complaints through official channels, tying up their bureaucracy in knots, as officers found themselves unable to execute orders while legal reviews were pending. The kindergarten teacher, Miss Sarah Williams, proved to be the most devastating of all. She had somehow convinced the hegemony high command that she was an expert in educational consultation and offered to help improve their training programs. Her suggestions were actually designed to undermine military discipline by introducing concepts of critical thinking and individual decision-making. Instead of just following orders, she explained in her sweet, nurturing voice during a video conference with hegemony training officers, "Your soldiers should learn to ask questions. Questions like, why am I doing this? And is this the right thing to do? And what would happen if I just didn't?" Within 72 hours, the hegemony war machine began to collapse from within. Soldiers started questioning orders. Officers found themselves paralyzed by bureaucratic procedures. Entire units became convinced that their commanders were corrupt. Some ships simply stopped responding to Central Command, their crews having decided that conquest was kind of a toxic work environment. Admiral Kexthara watched her tactical display in wonder as the most powerful military force in the sector began falling apart without a single shot being fired. "How is this possible?" she asked Captain Murphy. "The hegemony built their entire civilization around the idea that authority should never be questioned," Murphy explained. "They created a system so rigid that introducing just a little flexibility causes the whole thing to collapse. They're like a perfectly engineered structure that can withstand any external force, but falls apart the moment someone loosens a single bolt from the inside." Dr. Vasquez joined them on the bridge, looking pleased with her work. "Authoritarian systems are inherently unstable, Admiral. They only maintain cohesion through constant external pressure and internal fear. Remove either element, and they self-destruct." The card shark, a weathered man named Lucky Pete, had been running psychological warfare operations through their gambling networks. Turns out, when you give people a taste of real freedom, even just the freedom to choose which card to play, they start wanting more freedom. Who knew? As the reports came in of hegemony forces surrendering, deserting, or simply declaring independence from their own command structure, Kexthara realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic warfare. "You didn't break their ships or destroy their weapons," she observed. "Why would we?" Marcus asked, finally looking up from his gaming device. "Breaking things is expensive and messy. It's way easier to just convince people to stop doing what you don't want them to do." Jenny Parks grinned. "Plus, nobody gets hurt this way. Well, except maybe some egos and authoritarian power structures. But those needed breaking anyway." Within a week, the hegemony had effectively ceased to exist as a military threat. Their former territories had split into dozens of independent systems, most of which immediately requested membership in the growing coalition of free worlds. As the human relief ship prepared to depart, Admiral Kexthara found herself with a new understanding of what made Earth's people truly dangerous. "You could have conquered the galaxy decades ago," she told Captain Murphy. Murphy laughed. "Why would we want to conquer it? That sounds like way too much paperwork. Besides, it's much more fun to just help people figure out how to be free." Dr. Vasquez patted Kexthara's arm gently. "The most dangerous weapon in the universe, my dear, isn't a gun or a bomb. It's a new idea in the mind of someone who's ready to hear it." As the unconventional wisdom jumped to hyperspace, Kexthara realized that Earth hadn't sent soldiers at all. They had sent something far more dangerous, people who understood that the strongest chains weren't made of metal, but of ideas and who knew exactly how to break them.